Coming up, inside a deadly get-rich scheme committed by Uganda's witch doctors.
You need to sacrifice human blood.
CBN News brings us the explosive story. Then, Scott Ross sits down with the #1 name in Christian music.
That's where I really began to find my voice.
Stephen Curtis Chapman looks back at his Hall of Fame career. Plus, the entrepreneurs who landed a deal in the Shark Tank. The founders of Grace and Lace share their story on today's 700 Club.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I have a prediction to make. You can hold me to it. If I'm wrong, you can say you missed it. The health care bill is going to pass, is getting modified. The Freedom Caucus is going to get the modifications they're asking for. We're going to talk to David Brody to see what actually is there. But my prediction is it's going to pass. They're going to give Trump a victory. It's going to go through the Senate. And we are all going to rejoice that we're paying less on health care. Now, that's my prediction. And wait till tomorrow. You can prove me wrong if I'm wrong.
You heard it here.
You heard it here. Well, I knew that the Lord was going to give Trump victory, and I was arguing. People were arguing with me. No, he can't win. Yes, he's going to be the next president. Oh, no, he's going to win.
Well, we had that fascinating guest on that talked about, the Cyrus biblically and how
I had it
God
before the
used
fascinating
him.
guest, but I mean, before the election. All right. Well, the British government is operating as if yesterday's deadly terrorist attack in London was linked to Islamic terrorism. Surprise, surprise. It wasn't Methodists that did it. It was Islamic. That's the word from the British Secretary of Defense.
Scotland Yard believes the attacker acted alone, but they're also looking into possible associates, and ISIS is calling the attacker, quote, soldier of the Islamic State. Dale Hurd has the story.
British police have raided several addresses and arrested 8 people in connection with yesterday's attack by a knife-wielding man who used his SUV to mow down pedestrians on London's famed Westminster Bridge, then fatally stabbed a policeman before he was shot by police and later died.
There was bodies, literally.
Must have been about 10 bodies.
12 bodies.
The driver then crashed his vehicle into the gates outside Parliament.
And I see that one car smashed to the wall, and just people started running all over.
Among the victims, a Romanian woman who was in London to celebrate her boyfriend's birthday, shown here either being hit or jumping from the bridge. She was later pulled from the Thames River with severe injuries but survived. The dead, policeman Keith Palmer, seen here as officers and emergency workers furiously tried to keep him alive. Also, 43-year-old Spanish teacher Aisha Frade, who was on her way to pick up her children. Also, a man in his 50s. 29 were hospitalized and 7 were in critical condition. The number of so-called walking wounded is around 40. The attacker was British-born and known to British security, but his identity has not been released. The attack came on the anniversary of last year's suicide bombings at the Brussels International Airport that killed 32 people. ISIS claimed responsibility. Britain hasn't seen as many terror attacks as some nations, but it remains a factory of Muslim jihadists. 850 British citizens have left to join ISIS. It dawned on one tourist that he had come to a potentially dangerous place.
I'm from Brazil, and in Brazil is very safe. In London, first day in London is today, and my welcome is this.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
How many incidents do there have to occur in the cities of Europe before all of us in Europe and the United States realize we must crush ISIS? It isn't a question about negotiation. It isn't a question about sooner or later they're going to be choked and expire. They've got to be crushed and destroyed. There needs to be a massive strike on Raqqa. There needs to be a massive strike on their Syrian strongholds. There needs to be a massive strike to destroy them in Iraq. And then all over the world, wherever they're found, they need to be destroyed. They need to be destroyed, not brought to trial. They need to be destroyed. They are killers. They are monsters. And they have one goal, and that is to kill, maim, and wound innocent people. And it's time that they be brought to an end. Now, that means we have to mobilize, and I think people need to get behind the president and his national security advisors to say, let's hit these rascals where they are, where they hurt, and let's wipe out their sources of money and their sources of recruits. And anybody here in the United States that's playing games with them needs to be brought to justice as quickly as possible. I think this thing is a cancer. And look what they did in France. And the new game is drive a car into crowded civilians. How can any of us survive? If we're walking down a sidewalk and all of a sudden an SUV or a high-powered sedan comes rushing at us at 70 or 80 miles an hour, what are we going to do? Well, you're going to get probably killed, and we've got to stop this. Well, in the United States, it's an important day for President Trump and the Republican leadership in Congress. You've heard what my prediction is, and we're going to talk to, some of our reporters to see whether I'm right or not. But Abigail Robertson starts with this story from Capitol Hill.
House Republican leadership is fired up and ready to repeal Obamacare through the bill called the American Health Care Act. But getting enough support to pass it has been far from easy for the GOP. Skeptical congressmen like Jim Jordan voiced their concerns to CBN News soon after the bill was released.
Look, we're united on repeal, Republicans are, but right now some of the, quote, replacement and some of the things they're putting in with the repeal and the leadership plan, we don't think is consistent with what we told the voters we're going to do.
The conservative House Freedom Caucus argues the bill won't do enough to lower health care costs, and as such is a missed opportunity in replacing Obamacare the right way.
We didn't tell the voters we're going to repeal Obamacare, but we're going to keep some of the Obamacare taxes. I know I didn't tell them that.
22 Republican no votes would prevent the bill from passing, and a source told CBN News Wednesday that at least 27 GOP members were a no on the health care bill the White House supports on the eve of the scheduled vote in the full House.
There's Plan A and Plan A. We're going to get this done.
The president visited the Capitol in a closed-door meeting with Republicans this week to try to win over conservatives on the fence and to lay out the political stakes if their attempt at overhauling the healthcare system fails. He left the meeting hopeful he'll get the votes.
Can you get the votes, Mr. President?
I think so.
And there's been other drama on the Hill. Just 2 days after FBI Director James Comey confirmed they are investigating ties between Trump officials and Russia, House Intelligence Committee Chair Devin Nunes said a source had shown him information that Trump transition team members had come under apparently legal surveillance after the election during the final months of the Obama administration.
I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting.
Nunes didn't share his information with the ranking Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff, before announcing it. He says that names of the officials were unmasked or revealed improperly, and that they are going to conduct an investigation into who was aware of it and whether any laws were violated. Nunes briefed President Trump, who has said that Trump Tower was wiretapped by the Obama administration, and he says he feels somewhat vindicated by the findings.
I somewhat do. I must tell you, I somewhat do. I very much appreciated the fact that they found what they found, but I somewhat do.
And over in the Senate, Judge Neil Gorsuch's hearing on his nomination to the Supreme Court is moving forward smoothly, with witnesses now appearing before the Judiciary Committee.
I think that Judge Gorsuch will be an excellent Associate Justice on the Supreme Court.
Hannah Smith, two-time Supreme Court clerk and member of the Beckett legal teams that defended clients like Hobby Lobby and the Little Sisters of the Poor, is one of the people testifying before the committee.
He's written 800 opinions, and of those 800 opinions, the majority of them, by far, about 98%, have been unanimous opinions, which just shows what a consensus builder he is and how he has written opinions that all of his colleagues can join.
Senate Republicans are certain Judge Gorsuch will be the next justice on the Supreme Court.
Why anybody in this body would vote against you. I'll never understand.
After the hearings conclude, the Senate Judiciary Committee will vote on whether to send the nominee to the whole Senate with a positive, negative, or neutral rating. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News political correspondent, David Brody, is with us now from Washington. David, I know there's been a lot of horse trading going on. Can you tell us specifically, what did the Freedom Caucus want, and have they gotten it? Have there been changes in the bill, and can you tell me a few of those details?
You bet, Pat. Look, I've been burning the midnight oil. I have been on the phone quite a bit with many of those Freedom Caucus members. As a matter of fact, spoke to one about an hour ago. Look, they want two things. They want the essential health benefits insurance regulation repealed. They want it gone. Now, that doesn't mean they want the essential health benefits gone. You know, you might hear from the mainstream media, oh, the Republicans, horrible. They want essential health benefits gone, like maternity care and pediatric care. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that right now, obviously, in all of those Obamacare plans, there are these essential health benefits, which in essence drive up the cost of premiums. Because if you're 20 or if you're 65 years old, you don't need maternity care. And so that's what they want. They want that out of there. There is a second part. It's the Title I regulations. Not to get in the weeds, but basically, these are all of the other insurance regulations that they believe drive up the costs of these premiums. Now, this is where the wiggle room comes in between the White House and Paul Ryan and the Freedom Caucus, because they don't just want the essential health benefits repealed. They want many of these Title I regulations repealed. And so the wiggle room is how many of these Title I regulations will be repealed. All of this will be discussed today at a White House meeting between the Freedom Caucus and the White House. That's where a top leadership aide just told me moments ago. That's where the deal's going to go down at the White House today, and then we wait and see.
Well, from what I gather from the Freedom Caucus, they really want to give the president a bill that'll look good 3 or 4 years from now, and they're not trying to hurt him, they're trying to help him. Am I correct in that?
Pat, you're absolutely right. They call it a death spiral, that if you don't get rid of these insurance regulations, not just the essential health benefits, but those Title I insurance regulations we talked about, if you don't get rid of that and you just do some of the other stuff where you're repealing some of Obamacare, it's not going to matter and you're not going to have a good bill. Now, of course, the Republican leadership, Paul Ryan, has said all along, look, we're not going to be able to get some of these insurance regulations that the Freedom Caucus wants repealed. We're not going to be able to get it through the Senate because of parliamentarian rules. Well, now we're understanding, well, that might not necessarily be the case at all, because the parliamentarian may decide that because this is a budget reconciliation bill and you only need 51 votes in the Senate, that if something's not related to taxes and spending, then it won't pass the Senate. But the Freedom Caucus members are saying, give me a break. Of course, all of this is related to taxes and spending, so it would pass the Senate. We'll see.
Is Mitch McConnell ready to push it through regardless, do you think?
Yeah, in terms of the health care bill, absolutely he is. Look, Pat, this is, if I can I do a food analogy? Do you mind? Can I do this food analogy?
Go ahead, brother.
All right, so here's the thing. If you're a kid, right, Obamacare is like, now I'm talking about if you're a kid, not if you're Pat Robertson who eats very healthy, but if you're a kid, Obamacare is like broccoli. And the Freedom Caucus wants ice cream. And right now, what the Freedom Caucus is getting is like grilled chicken without the seasoning. They're not getting much, but they're not getting broccoli. They're getting something better. They're getting some of Obamacare repealed. So that right now they've got grilled chicken. Now, here's what Trump and Paul Ryan are saying. They're saying, look, grilled chicken is just phase 1. We've got phase 2 coming, which is maybe some bacon on top of the chicken. We got phase 3 coming, which is melted cheese. And then at the end, you're going to have a beautiful meal. So, a huge, big league meal. And that's kind of the scenario right now.
I think they're going to pass it, don't you? I don't think they can deny the president this victory.
I think you may be right, Pat. They're very close. My sources are telling me they're about 3 votes shy right now. Earlier, it was about 27 no's. I think it's about 24 no's. They're allowed about 22 no's, and then If they're at 23 no's, they lose. So they're about 25 right now. I think you're going to see movement. I think this bill is going to pass, but I think it's going to be a long night watching C-SPAN until about maybe 3 a.m. in the morning, where we just watch the clock tick until they get that final vote. Pat, you know the deal in the House. They can open a vote at 7 p.m. and they can keep it open for 7, 8, 9 hours as long as they want until they get that final vote.
Last question, of course, the next thing that most Americans are concerned about is tax cuts. I don't think they're going to try to overhaul the entire code. Can't they just cut some brackets and get on with that?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go necessarily for the whole enchilada, but they are going to try to make actually systemic tax cuts as it relates to middle-class tax cuts. And the Trump administration is calling these what they hope to be the largest in a very, very long time, since Reagan. And so we'll see. Now, whether or not if health care hits a snag, then the tax cuts may hit somewhat of a snag. But then again, let's remember, Donald Trump's bread and butter all along has been economics. It has been not just the art of the deal, but he's a businessman. He knows the tax code very well, and so this will be in his comfort zone going forward.
Great analysis. Keep it up, David. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Interesting, Terry. They're going to get it. I mean, they're going to give it to the president. Mark my word, it will pass. They'll get those extra votes. It'll go through and everything. You know, they're going to work together to give a tremendous health care. But the whole idea of mandates, of you have to have maternity care for a 60-year-old. You've got to have, arthritis care for a 20. Yeah, well, I mean, everybody's got to have health insurance for all the diseases that they will not ever have, and they're going to change it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the way you do it. They're making sausage. You don't want to watch them making sausage. You just want to eat the sausage when it's finished. All right.
Sausage, enchiladas, and ice cream. I'm getting hungry.
You had breakfast yet?
Whatever.
Okay.
Well, coming up, the humble beginnings of the most awarded Christian singer of all time.
I never thought of myself being able to do that until I saw a peer, somebody kind of my age, who'd written a song, and I thought, well, maybe I could do that.
Stephen Curtis Chapman tells us how he found his voice. That's later on today's show.
Coming up next.
I didn't even know what the phrase meant.
A story from Uganda that will shock you.
Witch doctors believe that when you kidnap a child, you get wealth, you get protection.
Children are being used as human sacrifices.
He was nowhere to be found.
And those lucky to survive speak out.
You just pray and ask God that this would never happen to anybody else.
Some decades ago, Winston Churchill called Uganda the jewel of Africa. It was considered one of the most beautiful places. The climate was lovely, the flora and fauna, the animals, it was a lovely place. I flew into Kampala some years ago, modern bank buildings, a bustling city. It didn't look like some bush village, and it's thriving, and the president of Uganda is an enlightened gentleman who, in my opinion, has done a pretty good job. He's getting a little bit more dictatorial, but nevertheless, it's good. But yet, this is the home of the infamous Idi Amin and the butchery that went on with him. And now some of that butchery is continuing in a different form. Every year, hundreds of Ugandan children, hundreds, are kidnapped and murdered as part of a thriving human sacrifice business. But now a Christian pastor is teaming up with police and politicians to stop this brutal practice. And we want to warn you that parts of this story are disturbing. But our George Thomas was in Kampala, in Uganda, to bring us this exclusive report.
It's a little after 2 in the morning, about an hour's drive south of Kampala. CBN News has joined undercover detectives, armed police, and a pastor hunting for a witch doctor accused of kidnapping and killing children.
Witch doctors believe that when you kidnap a child, you get wealth, you get protection.
Pastor Peter Siwat-Kiyanga leads the search. He runs Champesi Child Care Ministries, a Christian effort to stamp out child sacrifice in Uganda. He describes the witch doctor's brutal ritual.
When they get the child, most times they cut the neck, they take the blood out, they cut the genitals or any body organs that the spirits want. In a sense, it involves the child dying.
A few hours in, the trail for the killer goes cold. Pastor Peter says these gruesome crimes happen almost each month.
And there are very few actually that survive. Most of them die.
I had high hopes and dreams for Clive.
Rachel Kasingo's 3-year-old son Clive disappeared June 2nd, 2015, while playing in the backyard of their home.
It was around 10 in the morning when we noticed he was nowhere to be found.
CBN News met Kasingo the day police told her what happened to her son.
I've never even heard of child sacrifice. I didn't even know what the phrase meant.
Detective Emmanuel Mafunda took us to the spot, not too far from his home, where they found Clive's remains in this pit toilet filled with human feces. Mafunda said the key suspect turned out to be Kasingo's neighbor, a wealthy businessman who allegedly hired 2 men to kidnap and mutilate Clive's body, believing the act would bring good luck to his new hotel project. Detective Mafunda said the suspect paid the equivalent of $1,400 for Clive's life.
I found it so queer how someone, because of superstition, can be able to sacrifice a 3-year-old kid.
Child sacrifice today in Uganda is such a serious and widespread problem that the government has even set up an anti-child sacrifice and human trafficking task force. Chief Investigator Moses Binoga says that in addition to decapitation, witch doctors often slice the child's tongue and mix it with herbs for special powers.
The tongue is used to silence enemies.
Mike Chibita is Uganda's top law enforcement official, the equivalent of America's Attorney General. He says superstition and the desire to get rich quick contribute to high child sacrifice rates in his country.
The connection is these witch doctors come and tell people who want to get rich that in order to get rich, you need to sacrifice human blood.
Best friends Kanani Nankunda, George Mukisa, and Alan Simbatia are fortunate to be alive, but bear the physical and emotional scars of their past. The 3 are child sacrifice survivors. A few years back, Kanani and his 7-year-old sister were attacked in the bush. He has a 10-inch scar on the back of his neck where the witch doctor tried to drain his blood.
I fainted, and when I regained consciousness, I found my sister dead with her head missing.
2 men attacked Alan Simbatia on his way home from school.
I tried to scream for my parents, but my voice was not strong enough for them to hear me.
They stabbed his neck, sliced his head with a machete, then castrated him. Alan remained in a coma for 2 months after his miraculous rescue. George Mukisa's mother found him lying in a pool of blood after a man castrated his privates with a blunt knife. Doctors had to reconstruct his genitals with skin grafted from his forearm. The boys say they encourage each other to look past their physical challenges.
God is helping us in many different ways. When we think about what happened to us, we just pray and ask God that this would never happen to anybody else.
The 3 boys are now under Pastor Peter's care. Champesi Child Care Ministries is the only organization in the country providing long-term financial and medical care for survivors of child sacrifice.
We want to see that the life of a child who has survived is supported, that they are socially able to stand and heal from the injuries, and that they can have a life after that.
Rachel Kasingo says life without Clive will never be the same. Still, she has a message for the men who brutally murdered her 3-year-old son.
Because of my faith in Jesus, I believe in second chances, and I would give it to them because there's nothing I can do to bring Clive back. My message to them is confess your sins and come to the Lord, because when you come to the Lord, He will forgive your sins.
George Thomas, CBN News, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, the suffering those people have had to go through, but that's the superstition that's there, and that's why the answer is the gospel of Jesus Christ that teaches the dignity of each human being and the love of God Almighty. Terry.
Well, from Paducah, Kentucky to Carnegie Hall, Stephen Curtis Chapman looks back at his legendary career.
I can't say, honestly, it's a dream come true because a kid from Paducah doesn't ever think to dream quite this big.
The singer takes Scott Ross into his recording studio, so don't go away.
Coming up, from Shark Tank to our studios, the founders of Grace and Lay share how they took their company around the world. Later on today's 700 Club.
Well, you're watching the 700 Club. We're so glad to have you with us. Remember, some good things are happening. We've also got some questions to answer later on in the show, and I think you'll be interested in some of the questions and the answers. But I want to introduce to you a guy for the last 30 years has been making chart-topping records, Stephen Curtis Chapman. Recently, he and his wife sat down with our Scott Ross to talk about his career, life and death, and new beginnings. Here they are.
Stephen Curtis Chapman is the most awarded artist in Christian music, with 58 Dove Awards, 5 Grammys, and 48 #1 singles. I caught up with Stephen and his wife, Mary Beth, at his recording studio in Nashville. You started out more as a songwriter before you become a singer of the song, or what?
Well, for me it was because my brother, Herbie, was the singer. Right. And he had the voice, and my voice, first off, was a guitar, was an instrument, and that's how I really sort of said what I wanted to say. So I spent a lot of time with the guitar. My dad wrote songs. My dad and his buddies would get together and talk about it in the book, shut the kitchen door, and I'd hear them, I'd put my ear up to the door, and they'd be recording these songs. So I thought, I knew that was something really cool, but I never thought of myself being able to do that until I saw appear somebody kind of my age who'd written a song, and I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Even then, when I would play songs that I wrote, I would notice just a different reaction from my friends. They would lean in a little bit more and listen to what I was singing, as opposed to if I was singing a, whatever, James Taylor song, or Puppy Love, Donny Osmond song. So I think that's where I really began to find my voice.
After 30 years as a singer and songwriter, Stephen has taken some time off to write his memoir, Between Heaven and the Real World, My Story.
The stories that have had the deepest impact on me, and one of the reasons I was excited to finally get to write my story, it's when I can read the story of others who are following Christ, who are committed, but just are still on the journey. They haven't arrived, and can be honest about that process.
In his book, Stephen takes us from small-town Paducah, Kentucky, all the way to Carnegie Hall. He's candid about raising a family, adopting 3 girls from China, and his 32-year marriage to Mary Beth.
It took all of, I think, the drive home from the wedding, like 2 days after our wedding, where I was crying all the way home, and you're like, this is going to be, we basically,
it's gonna be harder than we thought.
This is going to be a long life.
Yeah.
This is going to be a long life.
A long life.
A long life. But yeah, just to live, making a decision to live as authentically and talk when we're going to be interviewed, when we are going to write, that it is going to be an honest approach at life, because we all have that stuff. We're not immune.
Stephen and Mary Beth lost their youngest child, Maria, in a tragic accident at their home. Maria was running to meet her older brother, Will, as he was pulling into the driveway, and she was struck by his SUV. How many years ago was this now?
Almost 9.
Almost 9.
It's coming up on 9.
Is the pain of that still there?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
You talk about it in depth in the book, and you do talk about it publicly all the time.
I share the story, from my perspective of just that, scene of us huddled, arms around each other, just looking at each other saying, we know this is going to be hard. We have no idea how hard or where this is going to go, but we have got to make this, to get through this together as a family. We're only going to make it together, holding on to each other and holding on to the promises of God. It almost is like God, in our case, gave us a shot of anesthesia to your body and to your heart in a way that you can survive, that there's enough of a numbness, you're very much alive and very aware of eternity. I mean, heaven and the real world there, I talk a lot about that. Heaven's never been more clear to me. I've never been more sure that we are made for eternity. And I talk about, speaking that to the nurses and doctors standing around right there after Maria had gone to be with Jesus.
Where are you now? Where is it all now? Where's music? Where are you going? Do you know?
Well, I start the book in Paducah, but I get quickly to Carnegie Hall, in New York, where I said people came to me after I played at Carnegie Hall and said, this had to be a dream come true for a kid from Paducah, Kentucky. And I said, really honestly, my answer was, no, I can't say honestly it's a dream come true, because a kid from Paducah doesn't ever think to dream quite this big, So this journey has been beyond anything we could have asked or imagined. And we want to continue honestly to be just faithful with the story God's entrusted to us. Music, I'm sure, will be a part of that.
Music has been his career, but Stephen is a man grounded in the truth of God's Word, a common thread that's woven throughout his songs.
Now there is no condemnation, and now there is no guilt or shame.
It says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And that's a promise that we have had to hold on to, because so many moments, in our story, and all of us have a story of life is anything but tasting good at that moment, or looking what we see does not look good. But even before then, can we really believe that we were still going to get to see the goodness of the Lord, that we were going to have grandchildren, and we were going to stand at the crib of our first grandbaby with tears in our eyes and with our arms around each other and say, we made it to this point. We're getting to celebrate this moment together, this new beginning, the new life that God has given us, and the beauty that has and is coming from the ashes, even as we're hoping and longing for what's yet to be realized when God finally wipes every tear from our eyes.
Now there is no guilt or shame.
What an amazing guy. And the thing of it is, he looks so young, but he looks so humble. He's still a young man from Paducah, Kentucky.
That's part of I think the draw to Stephen Curtis and to Mary Beth is just their humility, their realness, their genuineness in the face of some tough things.
Tough things, but man, success, it looks like that would blow his head like a balloon, but he's kept grounded in the Word. It's wonderful. That's what God wants. That's the kind of, person God's looking for. You got the book?
Well, I do. You can read more of the Chapman story in their new book. It's called Between Heaven and the Real World, My Story. It's available wherever books are sold. I think you'll find it wonderful to read, even as it was to hear them speak today. Well, still ahead, they're the couple who started a company and it wound up breaking records on Shark Tank. Get the secret behind Grace and Lace when we come back.
Welcome to Washington for this CBN News break. A 3-judge panel unanimously ruled that a school board in Texas can open its meetings with student-led prayer. The case involved the Birdville Independent School District, which has allowed students to pray since 1997. The judges from the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals noted a 2014 Supreme Court ruling that allowed prayers at town council meetings in Greece, New York. Now, the Texas ruling is expected to be appealed. Well, lawyers for a West Virginia public school system are asking a judge to maintain a children's Bible class that's been running for 75 years. WWVA-TV reports a mother has filed a lawsuit over the Bible in Schools program. She says it's unconstitutional, but the school district argues she doesn't have standing to sue because her child is in kindergarten and the Bible class doesn't start until first grade. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, cbnnews.com. Pat and Terry will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
A few years ago, Melissa Hennon snapped a shot of a lacy sock and tossed that photo online. Well, that sock helped launch a business, one that's doing millions of dollars in sales.
Rick and Melissa Hennon were excited to start a family. In 2010, when Melissa was 5 months pregnant, she was ordered on bed rest until the baby was born. To pass the time, she started sewing and knitting. They were heartbroken when Melissa lost the baby 2 weeks later. But Rick and Melissa decided to channel that pain into something good. They launched their company, Grace and Lace, by making and selling lace socks online. After appearing on ABC's Shark Tank in 2013, they hit $1 million in 5 days.
Please welcome to the show the founders of Grace and Lace, Rick and Melissa Hennon. And it's so good to have you both here.
Thank you so
We
much.
are so
Great
honored
to be here.
You know, there is a theme, it seems, running through our program today of children who have, for one reason or another, been lost, been in terrible situations. You, as parents, were in a terrible situation with your first child. Lost it, I say lost, but didn't survive. Was it 5 months when she was born?
Yeah, she was born, about halfway through my pregnancy.
Wow. I mean, that is just so hard to even imagine the heartache of that.
Yeah.
Out of that, though, where you were in the hospital on that bed rest before you actually delivered, you started doing something that, had you ever done it before, the knitting and the...
No, I had learned to sew as a little girl, and when I was confined to the bed rest in the hospital, they told me I have to lay on my back for potentially 4 months.
Good
so I could only
grief.
work with my hands, and so I picked up sewing again and knitting and crocheting, and that's really where my love for knits grew on that hospital bed.
Rick, you've always been a bit of an entrepreneur at heart.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, you always knew you wanted to do that, didn't you?
Well, I've started businesses from 7th grade on,
Wow.
and just been something that I naturally gravitated to and loved.
So here you are in this difficult scenario, and then the baby that you so believed was going to make it because of your 4 months of sacrificially lying still, you lose, and you're left with the heartache of it. How did you take that heartache and move forward?
Yeah, there's really 2 decisions one can make, and as believers that prayed with everything that we had, that had a ton of people praying for us, we could have made a decision to be mad, bitter, upset, ask God why didn't you answer our prayers? Or we could choose to trust in Him through the pain. And I told Melissa about an hour after our loss that we were going to make the decision to trust God. And if we got an answer of why it happened, great. But if we didn't, no big deal.
You know, the Bible says that God gives us beauty for ashes and the oil of joy for mourning, but you kind of have to make a decision in the midst of that you're not going to stay there, that you're going to let God move you forward. So you throw up online a picture of, this is kind of a form of it, but of a sock that actually sticks out of the top of boots,
Yeah,
right?
You know, it was on that time during bed rest where I developed that love for creating. And one day I just wanted to make a pair of socks that had lace on the top of them that stick on the top of my boots. And I did for myself. And everywhere I went, people would stop me and ask me where I got them. So Rick suggested I stick them up online, and I did. And they sold instantly. And within a matter of 3 days, we had sold over 500 pairs of socks.
Wow, wow. Can I just say, flying fingers.
Right. No, and that was the funny
like a
thing
mad
because
woman.
he was like, I was like, how am I going to make all these? It took me 5 hours to make one pair. So before we knew it, we had trained a bunch of others to sew them and to make them. And before we knew it, my accidental company, Grace and Lace, was born.
So Shark Tank, Rick, tell me about that, because that was a dream in your heart as well.
Yeah, we had been huge fans from the very first episode. And I even mentioned to Melissa early on in season 1, wouldn't it be cool if we had a business that was on Shark Tank? And sure enough, this business comes out of our tragedy, an accidental company that we thought, but not accidental in God's eyes.
Yes.
And I told Melissa after having the business for 3 months, I really feel like we're supposed to be on Shark Tank. And she kind of looked at me and smiled. I love you, but you're crazy. Whatever. It's not going to happen, but you just go ahead and
Keep fantasizing about
you
that,
just
Rick.
apply online. And so I didn't hear anything. I did about 5 times over a 4-month period, didn't hear a thing. And I said, well, maybe this isn't of God. Maybe I missed it, because sometimes we miss it. And I was on the phone with a good buddy of mine and asked him if he wanted to partner with us. And he said, I do, but I really feel like you're supposed to be on Shark Tank. And
Funny
I kind
you should mention
I kind of laughed and chuckled because we hadn't talked about it. I said, why did you say that? And he said, well, I've been praying about it, and I just feel that's what God has for you guys. And he said, I know a producer. Let me make a phone call.
Come on.
And within 15 minutes, we were on the phone with the producers, telling them our story. They said, we love it. We have to have you guys.
You know, sometimes I think God just wants to let us know this was really my idea, not yours.
Without a question.
So you wound up partnering and doing business with Barbara.
Yes.
And I mean, at that point, you must have had vision for this, but were you like stunned that it actually worked out?
Well,
it's surreal being on that stage.
Yeah.
It really is. And we had done our legwork before the show and knew and really felt the Lord leading us to partner with her. So when we did finally get a full offer from her, we knew that was it.
Well, let's leap forward into the success of your company. You now have, is it more than 400 products?
Oh no, we have about 1,000 SKUs at this point. We had probably 25 when we aired on Shark Tank.
About 40 employees, yeah.
So this is the initiator of the...
That is, yes.
Take a look at this. Wow. These are what do you call these? Are they called boot?
Those are leg warmers.
Leg
warmers. Yep, with buttons down them.
Okay,
and then the business has...
This is the boot top.
Yeah.
But you're actually, are you wearing...
I am. I'm wearing 2 of my pieces, actually, yes. So, you know, like I said, I started making this pair of socks with lace on it, and now I've just come to really be able to create what I'm missing in my own closet. And so we create and design all sorts of women's apparel.
Wow.
Yeah, this is my
So what do you call this?
That's a lace extender. So tops that you feel are maybe a little bit too short and just want a little bit of extra length, just like this one. You just, I just put it under there, and it turns any tunic into a dress.
So you have just exploded in this business that you're doing. You're not just hungry for the profit, as so many people would be in a business doing well, but you want to make a difference as well. You have some work going on in India. Tell us about that.
You know, when I was 18 years old, I went to India and I spent my summer there. And I had never seen poverty.
I agree.
Like that. I've been all over the world on mission trips. And I left there with a note in my journal that said, I've been so heartbroken. I'm working in an orphanage, seeing a baby with a bottle strapped to its face because there's not enough workers to feed it. And belly so extended from malnutrition. And I left with a note in my journal that said, I've got to do something more. Never in a million years would I think the Lord would give us a business that would be able to fund and support orphanages being built over there. So Grace and Lace has been able to build 7 in our last 5 years.
Talk about coming full circle.
Yes, yeah. We've been able to rescue hundreds of orphans off the street.
What a plan God has in all things, and who can ever understand it completely. But what an amazing story you have, and what an amazing journey you're on. It's so exciting to see where you're going with all of this and how God has truly given you the desires of your heart and fulfilled his own promises. Well, we want to thank you for being on the program with us today. Thank you for what you're doing. If you're interested in what Grace and Lace has to offer, both in product and also their involvement in India, just go to cbn.com. We'll tell you how you can see more about their product line. God bless you.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, coming up after the break, we've got another round of Bring It On. Here's a question. Jennifer says, before I was a Christian, I challenged God by burning a Bible. I've had troubles in my life since. Is this too much for God to forgive? Your emails are next, so don't go away.
To listen to our top songs of the week, go to CBN Radio at cbn.com.
Well, we want to take some time to respond to some of the questions that you have emailed to us. And Pat, this first one comes from Jennifer, who says, "Dear Pat, I was a pretty bad teenager and young adult. When I was having troubles, I unfortunately heard that Bibles won't burn. So, in one of my bad times, I challenged God by burning my Bible. I begged for forgiveness soon after, but before I was mentally mature enough to know you can't blame others or God for your problems. I felt deep down that all my problems were the direct effect of that horrible deed. I'm 37 now and still suffer in all areas of my life. I know God forgives, but was that too much for him to forgive?"
Look, the Bible is a book that can bless. It's the words, but it's not some magic book. It's pages, and so you burn some pages. I know that our Hebrew friends feel that a Torah scroll, is very sacred and has all kinds of consequences, but I don't think we feel that way about the Bible. It's the impact of the words. But the biggest thing is God will forgive you, and you need to get before him and say, "God, I sinned. I sinned because I was rebelling against you, and I ask you please to forgive my rebellion, and I submit to you." Now look, one of the things that I recommend that's so important is spend a day or two, if need be, before the Lord. Get a piece of paper, a yellow legal pad, and a pen, and pray, and everything that comes to your mind that you've done wrong, I want you to write it down. Everything. And say, "Lord, here's what I did. I confess it. I did it, and I'm sorry." Write it down. And when it's all over with, and you've cleansed your heart, let's say, "Lord, I receive your forgiveness for all this." Take that paper, ball it up, take a match and set it on fire, and it's gone. And it'll be gone before the Lord because he will have forgiven you all this, and you'll start a new life. He wants us to, listen, he wants your conscience cleansed from dead works that you might serve the living God. That's what the Bible says. He doesn't want you tormented because of some childhood discretion. He wants you for service. He wants you to get busy and serve him. That's what he wants. So how does he get you that way? Well, your conscience has got to be cleansed from bad works. He'll cleanse you. Okay, next question.
This is Holly, who says, "I would like to know how long Job's ordeal went on until all was restored to him. Was it days, months, or years?"
I think it was years. He had a long time. He was sick. He saw the destruction of his family. He was rejected. He was despised. The sons of people who he wouldn't even put to feed his flocks were out there making fun of him.
Even his wife.
Of course, his wife, cursed God and die. It was a horrible mess. So it took years. But the thing of it is, God just gave him back everything, double. So.
This is Alberto, who says, "Is it okay to split the tithe between different ministries, or does it need to go to one place?"
Look, I want to tell you again, God is not a Philadelphia lawyer. He's not a accountant. This is what's in your heart. What does God lead you? The giving is according to his love for you. And yes, if there's several ministries that bless you, well, by all means, participate in all of them. It's smart, though, to focus your giving into 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 sources. You have a lot more impact than if you just spread it out to about 10 people. That the little bit doesn't help that much. I would recommend that you focus in on what really touches you and what the Lord's really speaking to you. What else?
This is Darlene, who says, "Hi, Pat. A few years ago, I attended an event that my boss asked me to go to with her. There were many members of local churches there. It was like a revival meeting. After the meeting, a minister came up to me and said that God wanted me to know that he hears my prayers. At the time, I was really praying a lot for something. Does this ever happen? Can I believe that this was God speaking?"
Absolutely. God speaks to people. That was just a word of encouragement. And the Lord probably told that man, "This lady is praying, and let her know that I'm with her." God speaks to his servants. And you've got to be careful about being led by somebody else, but that's legitimate, what you just told me. Anything else?
Yes, Charlene says, our daughter's dating someone who is an apprentice in the Freemasons. As a Christian, are the Freemasons a bad thing to be a part of?
If you read Pike and some of the stuff that is written about them and what they believe the reverse. They believe that Satan is God, and that the Father in the Bible is Satan. It's very confused. There's a lot of stuff in there that is not wholesome at all. Now, whether that Pike writing represents current Masonic, some of them say no, not true, but the Illuminati and illuminated Freemasonry was really the underlying source of the French Revolution and the Communist Revolution. I mean, it's really some bad stuff. Whether American Freemasonry has adopted all of that is hard to say, because guys like George Washington were Freemasons. But in my opinion, I don't think it is biblical, and I would avoid it. We leave you with today's Power Minute from 2 Corinthians. For no matter how many promises God has made, they are yes in Christ. Tomorrow, uncover mysteries hidden inside the ancient city of David. For all of us, this is Pat Robertson and Terry Meeuwsen. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.